Have you ever sabotaged yourself without knowing the reason? So today I'm going to show you how your archetype can cause self-sabotage. So how does your primary archetype causes you to self-sabotage? Now, before we go further, there are a couple of things that we must understand. We must understand what are the archetype and what is self-sabotage, and how does the archetype or your primary archetype can cause you to self-sabotage. So, what are the archetype? The archetype, they were discovered by a guy named Carl Jung, who defined them as mental pattern or as mental images of the unconscious mind. It defines how we communicate, how we behave, how we act in the feasible world. Now, this is a way to frame, or this is a way to explain the unconscious mind better. Now, how does the archetype causes self-sabotage? Now, first thing you must understand, self-sabotage is whenever that you get in the way of doing something, even though you know that this thing that you're doing is good for your goals, or it's good for your life, or for the change that you're trying to make. So whenever you get in the way of doing something successful, of doing something good for your life, you are self-sabotage. Now, since the archetype, they are way that we understand the unconscious mind and way that we communicate, ways that we act. It's like mental pattern, like mental blocks, right? So they are example of behavior. They are the way that Carl Jung framed the unconscious mind. And one thing you must understand before I go further is self-sabotage is unconscious. So when no one decided one day, I'm gonna self-sabotage, or I'm gonna do something, or I'm gonna sabotage myself today, I'm gonna sabotage the success or the goal I'm looking forward. So no one decided one day that they're going to sabotage themselves. So self-sabotage, it's always unconscious. And one way to understand self-sabotage is understand how you act, how do you behave, for you to understand the patterns of your life, the patterns of behavior, the pattern of thoughts that you have. You must understand the unconscious mind. And for you to understand the unconscious mind, one way to make it easier for you is to use the archetype, is to understand what are the primary archetype that you have. What is the primary archetype that you have on your life? And because most people, they have one or two archetypes that are dominant. So the archetype, they're not for you to classify yourself as a certain group of people or as this group of people, but they are a way to understand human behavior, to understand the mind, to understand how we communicate, how we react to the world. Now, if you want to understand why you self-sabotage, you must understand, like I said, the patterns of behaviors, the patterns of thoughts, the patterns of reaction that you have. And one way to make it easier is to understand your primary archetype and see how it causes the self-sabotage. That's the reason. The first thing is to understand your primary archetype. Now, I'm going to make a video on each of these archetypes, on all 12 of Carl Jung archetype, and see how each of them can cause you to self-sabotage. So you can identify which one is yours and how it causing you to self-sabotage. Now, I'm gonna make a video about all 12 of them. Now, you can let me know in the comment which one that you would like me to go first, so you can understand what is your primary archetype and how it causing you to self-sabotage. Now, each archetype, they have the positive side, which is the one that we know, the definition that we give of it. But then have also the negative side, which is the shadow part of the archetype. And if we don't understand it, if we don't know the shadow part of our archetype, it will determine how we act, how we behave in the world in a way that will cause self-sabotage. So first thing is you must understand and know what are your primary archetype and see what is the shadow side of your archetype. Because this shadow side is acting unconsciously, determining what you do and when you do it. Because one of the mistakes that a lot of people make is thinking that self-sabotage is a conscious act. So they're trying to fix it with discipline, or they're trying to fix it with willpower. And it's not going to work like that, because that requires a lot of cognitive energy. So a lot of time when you sabotage yourself, you do it unconsciously. And like Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you call it fate. So first, we need to understand what are your primary archetype and see the shadow part of them that causes you to self-sabotage. But for now, if you need help, there is a free guide in the description below. You'll be able to see here the 4 levels of change and see which one of them causes you to self-sabotage as well. And you'll be able to see our framework, which is based on 5 modules, 5 steps to stop self-sabotage forever and change any area of your life.